back. This is Riley Davison, and you know you're listening to Bravo Zulu Radio. Thank you very much for doing so. I have the pleasure of having in the studio today is a lady by the name of Kathy Fletcher, and she's going to tell us everything that she knows and everything that she does for the children here in Bexar County and San Antonio for Voices for the Children. Kathy, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Riley. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. That's what this program is all about. So Tex from Guardians of the Children, he's the one that told me about y'all.
Tex is a good friend and a good supporter of Voices.
Yeah.
And they do a wonderful job with the Guardians.
Very passionate, and they really love what they do.
We love them. They're great.
Good. Okay, so tell me what it is that you do.
Okay. Well, Voices started, I think, 26 years ago.
Okay.
I was in the Department of Pediatrics at the UT Health Science Center at the time, and I walked out with a group of my colleagues from other organizations, from a meeting, a task force, a work group, something. And we all said, well, here we all are again, and some things are not changing, and we have to do things differently. We have to work more together. We have to look at root causes. We might want to look at policy, changing systems for children, because otherwise we just keep taking care of, and we have to do that, the same issues in children all over again. And we're not, in the end, making things better for children in the long run or in the future. So we started Voices. It was called the Vision for Children then, and some of that original group is still working in the community, and they're still our partners today. And then a few years later, we became part of a national network of child advocacy organizations and changed the name to Voices.
That's awesome. So when you say it wasn't changing, what is it? What are we talking about? What kind of issues?
Well, the issues we're most concerned about are child abuse and neglect, children's health and mental health, and the issues around the need for early childhood education and really increasing the educational level and the educational accomplishment of children so they go on to have basically a better future.
And productive lives.
Exactly.
Right. So when we're talking about mental, the mental stature, the attitudes, the whole surrounding of the child today, because of COVID and because of everything else that we're going through in our society, certainly this has been impacted like never before.
It has. We're particularly interested in the youngest children. We look a lot at the research, and we work a lot right now on trauma and what are called adverse childhood experiences with a number of partners. And child abuse is a major issue for children. It's a major issue here. We have an extremely high rate of that, as I'm sure Tex has probably told you.
Right. And when you say here, you're talking about San Antonio and Bexar County?
San Antonio, Bexar County.
Right.
That's our focus.
Right.
Most of the organizations in the Voices Network are statewide. We made the decision a long time ago that our commitment was to Bexar County.
Right.
So, but with the COVID situation, we know that families are under a tremendous amount of stress. There are a lot of people who've been laid off or furloughed. There's a tremendous amount of poverty in this community anyway,
Right.
and it has gotten worse. That means also that children are living with that stress. They're home, their families are home, and they're under a lot of stress. We know there's more domestic violence going on, and we know that impacts children emotionally and physically, and it goes right along with child abuse.
Right.
There are not as many reports right now of child abuse, which is actually very concerning, particularly for the youngest children. The major reporters of child abuse are teachers and early childhood, child care teachers, and school district teachers. And the children have not been in school,
Right.
and they're living with families who are under even more stress than usual.
And many times, it's the family that is actually perpetrating the sexual abuse,
It is most of the time.
Okay.
The idea that there's a stranger danger, I think we used to call it, The statistic I heard this morning was that's about 4%
Right.
of the
But
population
you would not-
that abuses.
If you talk to the average citizen, they would not believe that. They would think far and above, it's that outside person that we need to be worried about. But in essence, it's not.
No, it's not. It's almost always someone very closely connected to that child, whether it's sexual abuse or physical abuse or neglect.
What a shame.
It is. And one of the things I think people need to realize is it may not be reported all over, but it happens all over.
Right. Well,
It is not, obviously it goes along a lot of the time with the more stress there is, the more likely it is to happen. But it's all over the community.
Well, you're saying it's not socioeconomic and limited to those people that are more needy, but you're saying it is expanded
It is
across
all
the zip
over,
codes.
particularly domestic violence and sexual abuse.
Right.
Obviously, if there's more stress, if a family is very stressed out, if they don't have the money for food, if they are working 3 jobs, if they're about to lose their home, for any of us, when we have that kind of stress, we may lash out. And the person that's there is a child.
Right.
So that happens.
Wow.
But actually, it does happen
Well,
all over the community.
The average citizen goes through their daily routine, and they're not thinking about this. They're not thinking about that underlying situation that's affecting our community in such a way of such extreme gravity. And when you look at the potential that takes forward into not only our everyday lives, but into the future, it's going to have just a tremendous impact. I mean, we're talking about really the breakdown of the family here in the United States, the greatest nation in the history of the world for the most part, and now we're talking about things that should never have happened here.
Well, I think sometimes people think that it is not their problem.
Right.
It's my feeling that children are everybody's responsibility.
Yes, ma'am.
It is an adult's job
It takes a
to
village.
take care and protect children.
Right.
We also know from a lot of the research on trauma and adverse childhood experiences, and keep in mind it's not just family adverse childhood experiences. A natural disaster, something like COVID,
Right.
that is a trauma, and it's the number of those events, the numbers of adversities that a child experiences that really have the greatest impact on them long term. So it does impact everyone. It impacts them because it interferes with their learning. So you have children and later adults who have not learned, who've not succeeded in school, because it's very hard for a small child whose brain is being scrambled by a lot of trauma and anxiety and fear. It's very hard for them to learn and to grow up healthy. That impacts all of us. We know from over 20 years of research into adverse childhood experiences. Poverty is one, substance abuse in a family, mental illness in a family, a lot of things, along with natural disasters. And things you can't always control, like the death or serious illness of a parent. We know that they have long-term effects on adult health. We know that the major diseases, chronic diseases, diabetes, heart disease, some kinds of cancer, are all made more prevalent by adversity in the first 18 years, but particularly the youngest years of a child's life. So in terms of the health of a community, the health of our city,
Right.
It is no coincidence that we have an incredibly high rate of child abuse, of poverty, and of domestic violence. And we also have an extremely high rate of all of those very expensive chronic diseases.
Right. The future is being written today, and we have no idea what those pages are going to look like yet.
That's exactly right, and I think every community and all over the country and the world, we're going to see the impact of COVID long after this is hopefully over.
Right. So the pandemic has created many endemics that we're going to see played out.
It's made a lot of things worse. I think one of the most striking pictures I've seen, and it made the national news, was thousands of cars lined up at the food bank food distribution
Right.
event.
Right.
Many of these,
10,000, we made
Yes.
national news. You know?
right, exactly. Many of those people had never done that before.
Right.
You know, had jobs, and even if they worked very hard and didn't make a lot, they were surviving. They were self-sufficient. They were
The working
supporting
poor.
their
Right.
families,
Right.
and now they're hungry.
Right.
So this is going to have some impact long after it's over.
So the first time in months, we actually had some traffic that we had to battle to get here to the studio today.
Uh-huh.
And so we are kind of lifting out of it slowly. But then what you're hearing across the country is now we're talking about second and third
A
waves.
surge.
We're talking
Yes.
about the numbers spiking.
Yes.
And I think you really hit on the two words, anxiety and fear.
Right.
Because I can hear it in the voices of the people I deal with through work, through insurance, and you see it when you're out in the community, and just how incredible to have seen the changes in 9 months, 10 months now, since this all began.
Well, part of my training is in public health, and my other graduate degrees are in education, but my final one is in
Your
public
final,
health.
how many do you have?
4.
Oh wow!
Well, I have a doctorate in special education, then
Uh-huh.
a master's in public health after that,
Uh-huh.
because I was very interested in working with sick babies in hospitals, and
Right.
anyway. But I have never heard of, in any way, something that went this fast.
Right.
It's incredibly contagious. It's incredibly fast to spread around the world in a matter of months. And everyone's tired. I mean,
Right.
everybody understands that. But the more we do what we need to do to stop the infection, the sooner it's going to be over. Or at least the fewer people will get sick and die before there's a vaccine.
So you kind of pulled that lid right off of Pandora's box, and so it wasn't something that I was going to talk about, but from your public health perspective,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think we're looking at in terms of a short-term and a long-term situation with COVID?
Well, I can't tell you that because I'm not in public health right now.
Okay.
And the people, and some of them we work with Metro Health on the Trauma Consortium a great deal, Dr.
Right.
Colleen Bridger. I can't tell you that. It would be wrong for me to kind of predict. But I can tell you, just in general, that the more people want to quickly socialize, be in groups, and everybody's lonely. I mean, children certainly are.
Right.
We all
Right.
are. Nobody wants this.
Right.
But the more we don't follow things that will control an infection, the longer it's going to go on.
Well, when you look in California, and now that the major leagues are shut down, and they just won the pennant. The Dodgers won the pennant, and they showed all of those thousands of people coming
Right.
together. The Lakers previously, and so they basically said this all caution's been thrown to the wind here. Then you look in Philadelphia with the
Right.
shooting of that. You were talking about the impact to a family for mental health, and
Right.
and you saw that mother grieving and screaming, trying to keep her son from being
Mentally
killed.
ill
Yeah,
son.
yeah. And,
Well, a lot of behavioral and mental health issues have gotten worse.
Right.
The face-to-face treatment is less, although I think everyone has had to adapt. I know I have at a late age
Right.
had to adapt to everything being virtual, and
Right.
it's
and
terrific.
then it's like
but
a
it's
couple
not-
of months ago, Zoom. What Zoom? What-
Exactly. And I spend hours every day at
Right.
meetings on Zoom,
Right.
and it works. But
It's a stopgap measure. It doesn't work the same way that
in person,
right.
for some things particularly, for
Right.
instance, treatment.
Right.
You know, continual monitoring, home visits are not as frequent. Plus, the stress is greater.
Right.
The loneliness, the lack of social contact, the economic stress,
Right.
are so much greater. So all of those are going to impact
Sure.
children, adults, families, everybody.
And that's what I was going to say, is that when you're looking at the physical impact and you're looking about how many people have died and how many we're projecting are going to die, and when that's really hit at you every single day, and you're hearing these numbers, and that the anxiety rises, it pales in comparison to what's eventually going to end up being the economic toll that this is going to
The
take.
economic toll is terrible.
Right.
It really is. But on the other hand, it would be very hard to go back to a business if you have the continuing illness that some people are apparently seeing in COVID, or if other family members die.
Right.
Older people are more at risk, but plenty of young people, healthy young people, have gotten very, very sick and died. The economic toll of somebody being in an intensive care unit for a couple of weeks is incredible.
Right.
Incredible
Right.
expense. And think about how, for instance, a child feels. They may be fine from it, but grandmother died.
Right.
That's pretty
Or-
traumatic.
Or grandmother can't have anything to do with me for 3
Right.
months, 6 months, 9 months,
Exactly.
and you take that that endearment away from them and that opportunity to cuddle and get
Exactly.
close.
It's very, very hard.
Yeah.
The whole thing is very hard. And it's nobody, I think, would have realized with this, but we just have to do the
Right.
infection control measures. It's very hard right now, for instance, with a lot of the people we work with. We work a lot to improve the quality of childcare, and decreasing child abuse is part of that too, because this is an age where you want to be people to be the eyes and ears on children, and you want to help children heal from whatever they might have gone through, as well as be ready for school and kindergarten and success.
Right.
Trying to work with small children, for instance, toddlers.
Mhm.
I see your daughter. You've obviously had a toddler, and I have too.
6.
Oh my goodness. Well, I have 4 grandchildren now, little ones. But trying to manage masks, cleanliness, disinfecting tools,
It's hard anyway.
keeping
isn't it?
kids away from each other
Right.
is extremely hard.
Right.
But it's also extremely hard for parents not to have that option,
Right.
to have to maybe work or help a child with school, and also have very young children who are not in childcare. So it's, we are seeing, and we're doing a lot of teaching setting up training events on Zoom, which is actually
Right.
great. The reach is wonderful.
Right.
For childcare providers.
Right.
Free. We are always looking for some sponsors because it's hard, but it's very hard for them to access the training they need to keep their jobs or to get other jobs. And they're scared. And
Right.
some of the school district people are too, with safety, with their own health, with what do they do to help the kids? What do they do to keep them safe? If kids are returning to school and childcare, having been through a lot of anxiety and trauma, how do they help them?
So for 25 years, then Voices for Children, you recognized that there were changes that needed to be made. And so for those 25 years, what kind of an impact do you feel like you made?
Well, let me say first that our role is not the direct service.
Okay.
We work with probably 100, 200 organizations whose role is the direct service,
Okay.
who don't always have the time to step back and look at the big picture. So we're the conveners. We look at the issue. We look at an emerging issue, for instance, that's coming up, or a chronic issue. We do the research. We bring the partners together. That's what we do. Everything we do is with partners because we're looking at systems.
Right.
So, and
To
we
have
are
the
then
greatest impact possible.
Exactly.
Right.
Most frequently, we're in the background. And if we start something with our partners, it will go on and someone else will implement it. And to give you an example of that, we have a wonderful, innovative early childhood court through the Children's Court. Very different from a regular court. the senior court judge, Judge Sakai,
Mm-hmm.
meets every week or every other week with families, with all of their support organizations, everyone they're getting help from, everyone they want as a support, not in his robes. And children are then able to be, if parents succeed, and almost all of them do, in this court, then children are returned to them, and the children avoid the trauma of foster care, which we all know is a serious
Right.
barrier to anyone's healthy development.
Right.
So that's one. But we don't do the work. Our partners do, and the court does. But we worked with the judge and the court
So you
to
train
get
the
that
trainers.
started. Well, we got it started. We
Uh-huh.
did the research, we did the planning
Wow.
with the court and with a lot of partners, and then we stepped back. Now we are continuing to gather people together, several thousand now, child care providers,
Mhm.
to provide some training, because we feel that that's a niche. It's extremely important. We can integrate child abuse prevention into it. We can integrate our trauma work. South Texas Trauma Informed Care Consortium is one of the things we do, and that we helped start. We, the Children's Shelter, and San Antonio Metropolitan Health District started 2.5 years ago.
Mhm.
We now have over 500 people in the full consortium, an Institute for Trauma Informed Care, which is run by University Health System, a certifying body for organizations that want to be trained and certified in trauma informed care, which is the Ecumenical Center. But the full consortium is now almost 500 people, split up into 12 sector work groups, every sector that touches children and people.
Wow.
And that represents about 300 organizations.
So you are a busy
2.5
lady.
years. Well, we are, someone referred to us once, one of the community leaders, as the instigators. And that's still
But we need somebody to take the lead.
Probably the best definition
That's
of us.
That's all. Well, we need heroes like that are willing to give of themselves to promote the community.
Well, we are really fortunate because in this community we have a tremendous number of partners and a tremendous amount of goodwill and willingness to work together. I can't even remember when when an issue has been identified and we've started rallying people together that they won't. But this is also a very poor community in a state that tends to not fund health education and human services very well.
Right.
We are typically at the bottom.
So tell me what you want people to do now.
Oh goodness. Okay, as a person,
Mhm.
if you see a family or if you are in a family that needs support, either give it to people, whether it's a phone call, a note, a socially distant visit, do that.
Show
If
you care.
Show you care. Show that you understand that everybody needs support sometimes. And at this particular point in time, a lot of people need it. There are many organizations right now that are really struggling to survive, and that includes critical organizations for children. A lot of funding has had to be diverted to some immediate needs like food. And so a lot of the organizations have, and none of us can do fundraisers. And we all depend on that. So that's a serious issue for
Sure.
most of the organizations. So if you can help with a donation, it's wonderful.
Okay.
If you can help us, that would be wonderful.
All right.
We
Well, I'm going to be mentioning on this program a way that some people can get involved, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. But Kathy, on behalf of the community, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts for everything that you're doing for
Well,
the kids.
we really appreciate being featured because, you know, we are, like I said, we tend to be in the background. We're the people who convene and bring people together and work at the planning, and then we're not the ones who do it.
Right.
So that makes it difficult sometimes.
Well, we're going to try and bring you forward
Well,
and
thank
get you
you.
recognized for what
Thank
you do.
you.
Thank you,
I
Kathy.
appreciate that.
Mhm.